In 1991, the sheer volume of the world tour and subsequent prolonged mixing debacle for the live album left Neil Young with an acute hearing condition known as hyperacusis, a heightened sensitivity to everyday noises, making them painfully loud. As a result, Young retreated back to his acoustic guitar for the remainder of the year. In November, he played at the 5th annual Bridge School concert, the annual fundraising benefit concert Young had first organised back in 1986 to help children with speech and physical impairments. That year's concert saw Young playing a couple of new songs from Hank to Hendrix and Harvest Moon. Recording a new batch of songs had already begun back in September of 91 at Young's ranch. Engineer John Nowland had never worked with Young before and underwent something of a trial by fire, as when Young entered the studio, when Nowland was just still getting ready, he immediately started playing the song Silver and Gold, as Nowland was still adjusting the levels, making sure the guitar tone was okay. That's about halfway through the song. He hit the talkback button, interrupting Young as he was playing the song, and said, "Okay, we're all set to go now. Are you ready to go?" "It was like the speakers froze," he said later. Neil said, "I've been trying to record that song for 10 years, and that was the take." Nowland learned the hard way that if Neil was in the studio, you had to be rolling tape from second 1, just in case the next thing that he played was the take. He soon got his act together and recorded a bunch of new songs with Young, all of which he assumed were just acoustic demos, but in fact some of these takes ended up being used on the finished album. Seeking a warmer, more intimate sound, Young began using more analog gear again, vintage mics, and even going to the trouble of building an actual physical echo chamber rather than use digital reverb. The new songs were quieter, softer and more personal. So Young took the decision to reassemble as best he could the musicians who had played on the Harvest album back in 1972. The Stray Gators, Tim Drummond on bass, Ben Keith on steel, Kenny Buttery on drums, and even used the harmonies of Linda Ronstadt and James Taylor again. Jack Nietzsche also returned to the fold to arrange the strings for the song Such a Woman. Young also included more female harmonies with Nicolette Larson and his sister Astrid Young. There's a lot more feminine representation on this record than there has been on any of my recent records, he said. I wanted to feel the feminine side of the content of the songs. By using the same musicians from Harvest, and with the album being mainly acoustic, with all quite personal songs about relationships mostly, Young was finally making what people have been waiting for, a kind of sequel to his best-selling album from 1972. In classic Neil Young style, though, he made people wait 20 years for it. He also denied it was a deliberate move. "The songs made me do it," he said in an interview with Rolling Stone in 1992. The idea, Young said, was to sing about the same subject matter, but with 20 years more experience. The songs themselves weren't all new. You and Me actually dates from around 1971, as Young sang a few lines from the song at a concert that year in Los Angeles as part of the intro to I Am a Child. Unknown Legend had been around for years, unfinished, until he found the half-written lyrics and decided to finish it. One of These Days and Dreaming Man were also from the 80s, but the rest of the songs were new. Instead of deploying his usual method of recording very quickly and then just moving on, Young worked on this album for months, a lifetime in the world of Neil Young album making. Harvest Moon, as the album came to be called, was, unusually for Young, painstakingly handcrafted in a way not seen since perhaps his debut solo album. But unlike that first solo album, where yet to find his true voice and approach to his music, he had overcompensated with wall-to-wall overdubs and over-the-top arrangements, Harvest Moon is a lesson in understatement and minimalism. The playing of Ben Keith and Spooner Oldham on the songs is so understated that at times you barely notice it, but you can always feel it's there, and it's always completely in service of the song. Young's biographer Jimmy McDonough describes Unknown Legend as perhaps the most empathetic portrait of a woman Young has ever created. Young had indeed met Peggy when she was working in a diner in 1974, as he wrote in his memoir Special Deluxe. Back in 1974, there was a bar up on Skyline Boulevard, he said, California Highway 35, located on the ridge above the ranch. It was called Alex's, and Peggy was working there. Alex's was the place where I used to order just to watch her walk across the floor. After rediscovering his handwritten lyrics to the song, written on an old newspaper, Young picked up his old Martin D28, the one formerly owned by Hank Williams, and finished the song on the spot, remembering the melody and chords he had in mind for it as if it was yesterday. The song flowed as if it had always been there, he said. From Hank to Hendrix distills the theme of the album into one song. How do you keep going? How do you keep an old relationship new? Can you make love last? And can you bring the past with you? The song uses cultural references to measure time, from Marilyn to Madonna, from Hank to Hendrix, to convey the lasting nature of this love. Interestingly, it's an open-ended question whether the Hank of the title is Hank Williams, which would be the obvious choice, or whether it is in fact another Hank who had a profound influence on Neil Young's guitar style, Hank Marvin, lead guitarist from the British instrumental group The Shadows. Hank Marvin's melodic phrasing, with clear, ringing notes, can be heard echoing throughout Neil Young's guitar playing, even if at times it's often clad thickly in distortion, and Hank Marvin would make sense in terms of the title, as both Hank Marvin and Jimi Hendrix are both lead guitar players. On the other hand, some would argue it has to be Williams, as Young does own Hank's old guitar, and he even uses that phrase in the song lyrics as well. And maybe Hank Williams and Jimi Hendrix represent the two main divergent musical directions Young likes to take throughout his career. One acoustic, more country and folk based, the other fully amplified electric rock. Also of interest is the fact that the relationship described in the song does not appear to be about Young's relationship with his then wife, Peggy. The couple in the song are headed for the big divorce, California style. Or maybe it is. Young himself says there's a whole bunch of things in there. You're constantly wondering which way things are going to go, whether it's going to last or going to explode. Like all relationships, Young's relationship with Peggy had its up and downs, and eventually it did end in divorce, but not until 2014. You and Me was a song from the 70s, but Young abandoned the song in that decade after Tim Drummond, bass player from the Harvest album, enthusiastically told him that the song reminded him of the Harvest songs and that they should do it. Young immediately shelved the song. I got spooked by it, he said, because someone said what it was before we did it. I don't want to feel like I'm just filling in the numbers. The title track, Harvest Moon, is perhaps the most straight-up love song in Young's whole catalogue. He confirmed just as much in a 2021 post on his website. Harvest Moon is a song I wrote for Peggy, my wife of many years, who gave me two beautiful children and helped bring up my first child, Zeke. She was a dancer and floated around when she was happy. Musically, the song, well, the main riff anyway, is clearly inspired by the Everly Brothers' 1961 hit Walk Right Back, and has become one of his most popular songs to this day. One of those songs of his that has gotten a whole life of its own, being widely covered by various artists and become the favourite song of people who aren't even necessarily fans of Neil Young. Natural Beauty was recorded live, then overdubbed in the studio, in a way reminiscent of Will to Love from the American Stars and Bars album, only with female harmonies this time. The song's lyrics both eulogise a woman's beauty and the beauty of the natural world at the same time. A natural beauty should be preserved like a monument to nature. Again, can we make it last like a musical ride? The song also contains a reference to his use of digital studio tricks in the 80s. I heard a perfect echo die into an anonymous wall of digital sound somewhere deep inside of my soul. Young was by now walking right back from being all in on the new digital technology of the 1980s, and was now trying to bring back the warmer sounds of records made with analog equipment in the 60s and 70s. Such a Woman is a collaboration with Jack Nietzsche, featuring an 18-piece string section, but unlike the songs A Man Needs a Maid and There's a World from Harvest, Such a Woman manages to avoid sounding too overwrought or melodramatic. It soars with simple lyrics that benefit from not trying to be clever or complex for their own sake. No one else can kill me like you do, and no one else can feel our pain. The song drew mixed responses from people. Jack Nietzsche himself criticised the mixing of the song on the album. Live, the strings were beautiful, he said. So much dynamic range, but when I hear the record, I think, what did he do? David Briggs not involved in the production of this record at all, thought it sucked. One of the most trite, meaningless songs Neil's ever written, he said after the release of the album. However, in my opinion, I think this is just behind Unknown Legend as the greatest tribute Young could pay to his wife at the time. And despite the epic string arrangement, it still manages to sound intimate. When Harvest Moon was released on November the 20th, 1992, 20 years after Harvest, not all the critics were jazzed about it. The usually very enthusiastic Paul Williams said it lacked vulnerability and it just doesn't deliver. Jimmy McDonough, in his book Shaky, is very lukewarm on the album, calling the song Harvest Moon bland and describing the album as a whole obtuse and impenetrable. In my opinion, these are bizarre takes on an album that I think does actually show a lot of vulnerability, emotional openness, and some of Young's most direct and least obtuse and impenetrable lyrics, especially songs like, One of These Days, Old King, Unknown Legend, Harvest Moon, Such a Woman, You and Me. But okay. However, overall, not only was it received actually quite positively by most reviewers, it was a huge hit with the public, aided by the MTV friendly video for Harvest Moon. The album went platinum within 3 months of its release. Harvest Moon has in fact stood the test of time very well, and I consider it to be one of his very best albums. So yes, I do think it is an underrated masterpiece. The time of the album's release was also, of course, the height of not only grunge, but the height of Young being called the Godfather of Grunge by the media. Not just Nirvana, but now legions of bands were all over MTV and the radio, and they all seemed to dress like Neil Young circa 1971. Flannel shirts, jeans, scruffy long hair. The previous year's Weld live album and tour had, welded him into that place at the top of the grunge hierarchy. So now he was all too happy to completely confound everybody's expectations by releasing a very quiet, introspective, intimate album tinged with country and folk influences. I'm entering my Perry Como phase, he said with a wry smile. People need to have a name, he said to Jimmy McDonough. They can't understand why I'm still here, so they call me the Godfather of Grunge, because they think they can relate to that. Before the album was released though, from January to November 1992, Young had been playing solo gigs all over, which at first consisted mainly just of the Harvest Moon songs, even though the audience had not heard the album yet, much as he had done with the original Harvest and the Tonight's the Night albums. Towards the end of the year though, the set list got looser and looser until he was playing songs like World on a String, Speaking Out, and even older unreleased songs from the 70s like Home Fires, Hitchhiker and Depression Blues. It was also around this time that he started playing a version of Like a Hurricane solo on a pump organ, which was mesmerising. Young found on this tour that he had gained a new audience. These were young people who wanted me to do my hits, he said. Ragged Glory, Rockin' in the Free World. They wanted me to get out there and get really intense, but they didn't understand that I don't always do that. The fans who'd been around since the early 70s had learned the hard way again and again that he didn't always do that, or even anything that the audience actually wanted to hear. Now a whole new generation was being taught the same lesson in artistic autonomy that Young had made his whole reason for living. These new fans, however, would not be too put off by Young's seeming 180 in musical direction. After Harvest Moon had become a hit album, his old nemesis, MTV, invited Young to record an Unplugged show for their series of the same name. The Unplugged series was by now a huge deal. Eric Clapton's album of his performance had just won 6 Grammys and sold millions. It seemed like a no-brainer. Young's stock was high, his music perfect for the Unplugged concept, and he had gained a new resurgence in popularity with a younger MTV watching audience. What could possibly go wrong? Well, as it turns out, quite a lot actually, so we'll get into all that in the next episode of this series. Stick around, watch the old videos, subscribe if you haven't already, and consider joining our Patreon. We would really appreciate the support, and it's only £1 to join for a whole bunch of stuff that's not available on this channel. All the links are in the description below. So until the next video, Thanks for watching. Bye for now. On the roller coaster ride, my emotions have to take me on.